Okay, 6 o'clock. I will call the WSESU board meeting to order. Let's start with our mission. The WSESU mission is to provide a safe, inclusive, and supportive environment where all students grow academically, socially, and emotionally, and are challenged to reach their potential as local and global community members. We're not in our usual room tonight, so we are nice and cozy. We're going to try to keep focused on the budget as much as possible, but we do have some housekeeping to do. So let's, I would like to add an additional executive session to the agenda, so a second. It is also under 1 VSA 313A3. A3, yes. Is there a motion to amend the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Kelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Liz. All those in favor of amending the agenda, say aye.
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 Oh, I don't vote, sorry. Remember where you are. Remember what meeting you're at. All right, we will do that at the end. Consent agenda, approval of minutes, December 7th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So made.
Thank you, Tim. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kelly. Any comments or discussion on the minutes of December 7th? Hearing none, all those in favor of passing the minutes of December 7th, say aye.
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 All right. We have warrants and payroll. Warrants of November 23rd in the amount of $459,412.95. The warrants of December 7th in the amount of $364,448.66. And the payroll of December 2nd. Is there a motion to approve?
So made.
I'll second it.
Okay, Tim gets it and Liz gets the second. Any comments or questions?
Are there any handouts of the information?
Of
Any of the packets of all the budget?
the budget, do we have an extra budget?
We do.
Budget coming up.
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor of the warrants and payroll as presented, say aye.
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 Okay. Administrative report.
As we discussed earlier today, Carrie, I was just going to pass on that so we could just get right to the budget, given that I gave a pretty lengthy report last night.
All right. Public comment for non-agenda items. Is there any comments? Oh,
I'm Ricky Rosati. I'm in my last year of an elected term as being a District 8 representative, and I am running for the Brattleboro School Board, and I brought the petition with me to collect 30 signatures with so I can be on the ballot if people want to reach out to me to find a time and place to sign it. I'm also hosting 2 signature collecting events coming up tomorrow at the co-op from 12 to 2, but also at the Saturday Farmers Market on Austin Drive in Brattleboro. I should be there by like 10:15 a.m. So I'm really easy to find online. I'm Ricky Rosati, and I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook, and so I appreciate anyone telling me what they want from candidates. Thank you.
thank you, Ricky. Are there any other public comments? Anyone in Zoom land?
Just a question. You said you'd be at the co-op tomorrow, and then where?
At the Brattleboro Farmers Market, which is in the Prouty Center on Austin Drive.
Okay, if there are no other public comments, going once, going twice, we will move on to the budget. Frank, take it away. I will give you sharing rights.
All right.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you. So we were scheduled to talk about the food service programs this evening, and then also revenue assumptions based on our budget timeline. So thought maybe we would start with the food service operation. Typically we look at the programs first and then understand the expenditure proposals, and then we review the revenues to fund that. So I've got a copy of what I've handed out and what's on the website, what was emailed. It's the budget document. And this is actually now a complete package of what we've reviewed for the last several weeks. So I'm on the first page at the moment of this 97-page document for the fiscal year 24 proposal. And on the first page, just as a kind of a revisiting of where we've been, we have looked at the admin budget and in support of instruction. That was the first one that we reviewed several weeks ago. And on that expenditure side of the document, you see that's that first group, 5,000,009 is the proposal, which includes transportation, our English language learner program. I'm in the far right-hand column there in terms of just making a reference. The school age special education, you see as the second group that we reviewed, that was last week. That proposal was 17,426,000. That's for both school age and our preschool age students. And then I think it was the first meeting we had, we reviewed the grant proposal. That's the next group of figures down there toward the bottom of that document, the summary page document. And now tonight we'll review the food service proposal. So 2,409,000 is the recommendation, and you see it is a similar change, based on the inflation rate that we've been addressing throughout so many of our programs and cost drivers. However, just make the point, because you haven't seen this all put together, you see the total program, total expenditure proposal. If the board was to make a motion, this is the number that we refer to, 31,253,000, which is actually down 3.2% from the current budget. And as we discussed earlier, much of the reduction is the exiting of the ESSER 3 funding, the pandemic support federal grants that have been so helpful over the last several years, but they are phased out at the end of this proposed fiscal year. So that would be June of 2024. Maybe one other thing, just so you kind of have your bearings here, navigating documents. You see on the very far right-hand side of this first page, it gives you some page numbers. So you see food services up top there. It's in the same order, so it's the last group in the revenue section. It refers us to page 86. And then on the expenditure side, which is what we can jump to, is on page 91. And then maybe last thing for just kind of general orientation, please note that the page numbers that the documents are referring to are at the bottom of the page here, like a portrait doc. The information that prints out of the system is in a landscape format, and it comes out in different report configurations, and we just wanted a simple way for you to follow. So if we could go to the expenditure side, page 91,
Frank, can I just ask, can
Yeah.
you give us the big 30,000-foot picture on how it works?
Yes.
I always need the reminder
Yes.
of that, because then I won't ask my normal questions later. It'll kick in.
Yes, so this is the child nutrition program, primarily funded through the USDA. This is oversight is from the Agency of Education Child Nutrition Office, but it's very much a pass-through from the USDA. So the Agency of Ed monitors our programs, but they're basically looking that we are following the federal rules in terms of food safety, procurement, bidding, anything to do with providing food service to our children. It does serve all of our buildings, all of our children in terms of this proposal. All of our schools except Putney Central School are part of a contracted service agreement with Fresh Picks, and the Putney Central School staffs and operates their own food service program, but it's still very much subject to all of the rules that we've talked about, and is substantially subsidized by state and federal, mostly federal support.
I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you. Are we legally required to contract with the USDA, or is that optional?
If you want if the district wants the reimbursements, yes, it has to be with the USDA. But if the district wanted to fully self-fund, they certainly have that option.
When was the last time that happened in Brattleboro?
5 years ago, we're in the 5th year of the contract, I believe.
Yeah, the bid cycle is every 5 years,
years.
but a self-funded program,
Oh,
I don't think it's.
oh yeah, sorry, we've never done self-funding.
This is a $2.4 million program. During the pandemic, it was substantially 100% funded by the USDA and the federal grants, and that's a significant cost that is not in the local budgets because of that. There are nutritional standards. There's oversight that those standards are met. And we've given the food service operators a lot of feedback on nutritional requirements that actually administrators in our system increase the food quality substantially over the USDA minimum requirement.
Do we have a policy on that, or why am I thinking that there was?
There's a wellness committee that works
that's it,
on
okay.
developing guidance for that,
Okay.
and that's a very active committee. And as we move toward the bid process in January, February, we'll be hearing more from those folks. That's all part of creating a rubric to evaluate bids. In terms of quality and service and price.
Okay, walk us through the expenses.
All right, so if we look on page 91 on that portrait format of the report, information is organized by school site. Even though the Vermont statutes require that the supervisory union operate the food service program and is basically the school food service authority, that's what they call us. We still organize information by school site so that we can evaluate both cost and the revenue that goes with that. So the first group of expenses you see down there on page 91 is at the Academy School. The Academy School is also, the kitchen serves Green Street and Oak Grove. So there is a reference to Green Street and Oak Grove schools here, but it's a very small footprint. It's just the fresh fruits and vegetable program, which is a very small component of what the overall food service looks like. You may recall fresh fruits and vegetables, you have to be eligible. It depends on a poverty level in your school to the extent that a school can access that. And it's out of all of these costs and programs, that's 70,000 out of the 2.4 million. It's a relatively small state subsidy. So I'll go through a couple of the sites, but the format and the information you're going to see is very kind of uniform and it repeats itself. So if I go over a couple of sites, you'll understand the rest of the program. So, for example, because Academy is our largest elementary school and it serves several other locations, you see at the bottom of page this 91, the largest number that is at the very bottom of the page, 683,000. This is the food service contract that 5 years ago, the state of Vermont pushed all of us, all public schools in the state, to go to a fixed price format of contracting. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be that the bid would be based on a kind of a full service model of, they would show us, here's our chef, here's the cost for our kitchen support, here's the cost for our food to procure for you, here's the cost for our fuel, our equipment, and so on. The state, for whatever reason, pushed the entire public school sector to a fixed price contract, which means the bidders come to us with a cost per meal. And that's all we see is a cost per meal. And this 683,000 is the cost per meal for the Academy and the other 3 schools.
Deborah has a question.
Yeah. Is it possible to share that screen? I don't have the full report, so I can't see page 91 or anything.
Sure. Yeah. And Deborah, if you are online, you could get that on the website.
It's under our agenda.
Under the agenda.
Okay. I'm scared I'm going to lose my screen. So yeah, that's my problem. Thank you.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
I can share that screen for you. There's page 90, and there we go. And we're going to go to 91, which is the beginning of the expenditures. So I was referring to the 683,000 figure at the bottom of the page. So that's the price per meal contracted amount proposal for fiscal year 24, and that is within the confines of the existing bid contract. Well, fiscal year 23 is. Fiscal year 24 is the assumption that in our best judgment, where we see food inflation and labor and fuel and all of the other things that go into providing a food service. This is the analysis that we've produced this proposal.
Frank, I have a question.
Sure.
So, if I'm not mistaken, and from thinking previously, or hearing previously, that Academy prepares food for other schools. So does this number here, has it taken out the cost of those other schools?
No, this includes Green Street and Oak Grove.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Since for the free lunch designation is gone, we provide meals to everybody now. Has that impacted this at all?
It has, but it really is more on the revenue side that the impact is, because we've been doing the free meal option since the beginning of the pandemic. So on the cost side, we don't really see a significant difference, but other than inflation, but on the revenue side, that's where we see the universal meals you're referring to, Tim, is there's 2 components. One is a state component that the legislature indicated they were going to fund 1 year only.
And that's next year?
That's this year.
23.
that we're in now.
In 23, okay.
For us, it's about a little over $500,000 out of this 2.4 million is the state sending us a check.
Okay.
They have made no commitment to that next year, and the USDA has not made any commitment to sustaining the higher level of reimbursement. So at this point,
Wouldn't it all wash out because they give us more money for more meals and we spend for more meals?
no, because it's a reimbursement per meal served, and it's based on a cost per meal. So cost per meal has ranged, but it's somewhere in the vicinity, let's say $4.50 for a lunch. And the USDA prior to the pandemic was reimbursing us only about 50%. So we would have a significant line item in local budgets that
Right.
would make the difference up.
Which we didn't have one year, I thought. I thought we got a little break there, but then we weren't sure, so we funded at our local level. And then when we didn't need it, we used it for other reasons.
We're going to.
We're
use
going
it.
to use it. We were like, okay, we're still gonna put it in to be safe. Then we got the good word. But now in the budget, Monday night when I'm in Vernon, I'm gonna see a line item.
This is the year we're going to unwind the deferred revenue.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And
All right,
we
that's
don't
helpful.
know to what extent we'll unwind it. It does depend on if the state says, hey, we are going, and I've been hearing preliminary figures that says the ed fund is very healthy.
Right.
So if they support us, then we won't need to use all of our deferred revenue. If they don't support us, we have enough in deferred revenue to go another year without assessing our local districts.
At a universal meals level?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and we'll see that when we flip to the revenue side. So maybe just a couple of more things on the academy, and thank you for your questions. You'll see the same pattern as I said. Academy on this page 91. You see that 21,000 in there for the fresh fruits and vegetables. That's what FF&V means. So Academy qualifies. They're about a third of the total grant, and that's the cost of actually going out and buying local fresh vegetables. So I'll scroll through a couple more pages. The next group. Well, here's the total for Academy. So the lion's share, as we said, is the contracted food service. There are other components. You see the very top line on page 92, 37,000. That's for after-school program. And then you see the total there, 802. The high school program is actually a kind of a similar volume. Secondary, have a little bit different meal habits, maybe a little bit different menu, but also because the high school is such a larger single, kitchen with a student body all at the same campus, the cost per meal is actually a bit lower.
Is this BAMS as well?
This is also
This is
BAMS.
also BAMS,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so even though they serve a lot more kids than the 3 elementary schools, the cost is not that much more, and it's because their cost per meal is lower. So that's the pattern, and then now you see Dummerston. I'll just refer to the bottom line there. There's Dummerston at 120,000 with the same sort of distribution of cost. Guilford at 107. And these vary based on participation rates at each school, and then of course the number of kids in a school. Putney is the self-run program, so you see Putney is on page 95 is the total, and you see the total Putney is 202,000. But here it is kind of a one-of-a-kind document from the operations side, I'll scroll back to the beginning of page 94. What you see here is you actually, you have what used to be conventional salaries for the chef and the support person, health insurance, everything you would normally see when an employee is being paid. And then you see the actual food costs there toward the lower part of the document. And then Vernon is on the following page, after Putney there, page 95, 122,000. And where you see some variation, it's a reflection of projected cost increases, but also projected participation. And that also depends on, in Vernon, how many sixth graders are leaving and how many kindergarten first graders are coming in, and what does that look like. So that's all part of the analysis. So as I mentioned, Green Street, Oak Grove, it's just basically fresh fruits and vegetable activity that you see there. And then the district-wide is the last group there on page 96 and 97. District-wide is the summer food program. And also we have Susan Grabowski doing a great job with assisting with coordination, actually being part of the summer food program's oversight. We just had an Agency of Ed, USDA monitoring review around how are we doing following the rules, and Susan is very much part of coordinating that. She also works with the health committee there to check in on how are our kids, feeling about food, how are the operations working within schools, what are the types of issues that we need to address. So that's all part of the district-wide. So there's that 2,409,000 on page 97 that we started with on the summary page.
So, question.
Sure.
The summer food coordinator is gone. Is that because the food program coordinator is taking over those duties? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Where do we see the farm to school expenditure?
Farm to school is not part of the food service program. It's in the SD budgets.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's more of a curricular related support, student support.
Yeah.
So if you'd like, we'll go to the food service revenue while we're in that area, and then we do want to take some time to check in on the special ed and the admin revenue assumptions as well. We've kind of already reviewed the grant revenues in that when you look at the expenses, all the grants have a corresponding revenue source. So we've kind of already done that. So food service revenues, I'm scrolling up to their
86?
Yep, 86. So this is similar, where we'll look at a couple of schools and then you'll have a pretty good overview of all the other schools. Okay, so I am on page 86 in the detail document. And the first group there is the Academy School again. And this gives you a pretty good idea of what the different sources and the magnitude of the sources are. So you see we've got 595,000 in projected revenues, and the largest number there is the school lunch in the middle of the page of page 86 on the proposed. You see 310,000. And if you glance across the columns, you'll see, there was a couple of zeros there, and then back in 22 we had a number in there, and that's the reflection of the between the USDA and the state changing the type of reimbursement that has been funding these programs through the pandemic. But the 310,000 is the getting back to the conventional USDA subsidy. The next line there, 186,984 is the breakfast subsidy. And then we have a $40,000 in commodities. That's actually not cash. That's a equivalent value of cheese and food staples that come through the USDA. And so you can see out of 600,000, over half is the lunch, and then breakfast is nearly the entire, the balance of the revenue. The rest of the revenue sources just aren't, they're not that significant. So that's the academy. Maybe we'll look at a couple more. So the next group there is the high school. Same kind of dynamic, where when you go to page 87, again, you'll see most of the revenue out of the 637,000 is the school lunch and breakfast, and then some kind of an evaluation of commodity. So that's how this is funded. I do want to zip down to district-wide, because that's going to address your question, Carrie, about what does the road ahead look like when we have to carry this on our own. So if you look at page 91, the document basically goes through each school, as we just said, and then you get to page 91, and these are the district-wide sources. And I just want to draw your attention to district support, 745,000. That number normally gets pushed into the Vernon district and the SD district food service subsidy expenditure. But that number is going to come out of the balance sheet on the SU. It's going to come off deferred revenue.
Is that number?
It's part
It's
of that
part
number.
of that number? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
It's the balance sheet, meaning we're talking assets, liabilities. It's not part of a annual budget source generally, but
Okay.
but we foresaw this, a few years ago. We knew we needed to have a reserve, and here we are. We think we'll likely need to draw on that. Another way to say this is what we've discussed is 2.4 million in cost, and I've showed you the USDA revenues for breakfast and lunch. When you add all of that up along with those other little pieces of revenue, we're short 745,000. If that 745 wasn't there, you got a deficit, and that has to be funded. So that's a kind of like the back end number. But our reserve is sufficient to cover that.
For 1 year.
We're hoping this is the worst case. We're hoping that the state does reconsider universal meals, so we think this is the worst case.
How much is in our reserve?
Pardon?
How much is in our reserve?
The deferred revenue is nearly $1 million.
Excuse me?
Ricky?
So when you say that you hope that the state re-signs the contracts to give us more money, who exactly is the representative that would be responsible for signing that?
It's the legislature. It's not an individual, but
So all of the Vermont legislators?
they vote on that, just as they did last year. Yeah.
Do you know if there is a time scheduled for when they're going to vote on that?
I don't believe they've started the deliberations. Generally they do
It would be around
reconvene
their budget,
in
probably.
January, and then when this year's funding was decided, it wasn't until like July. It was very late.
Right.
It was very late in the session.
So is it guaranteed that they're going to vote on it again, or is it not even guaranteed that there'll be a vote? Okay.
No, they made it clear that it was a one-time and it would be subject to the next session. But
Yeah.
yeah. So that's our food service. We did want to talk about the largest source of spending and revenue for the SU, and that is special education. So are we good to move on to that?
I think, Liz, any questions on food service?
No, I don't.
Thank you. All right.
All right, I'm going back to the first page of our document and now transitioning to the revenue for the rest of the programs. So just again, a little orientation. Now we're looking for how are we funding on the top of this page one, the first page on the big handout, transportation, English language learner, Asian studies, and the admin. That's the very first line, 5,000,009. So we'll go over that, and now we're gonna get into that allocation methodology that we've discussed and board has had in place for several years. And then we're going to get into the 16.2 million for the school age special ed, and then that should do it, because as I said, we just covered food service, and grant funding is always matches spending, so you've reviewed that. So let me give you the overview, and it is, here's the second page. If you're looking on Zoom, it's the second page of the document identifies the methodology that we're going to use. It's this guy right here to allocate those costs, and we're allocating it to the SD and Vernon, but we're also identifying other sources of revenue so that we break even. It's pretty straightforward. Where we take costs, we subtract revenue, what's left over has to be assessed. And it is basically a proportion of enrollment. This next page here, page 3 in your book, is on the screen here. And here's those statistics I was referring to that I've been waiting for from the Agency of Ed. And they drive so much of the cost distribution. What we're looking at is our K through 6 and K8 and then 7-12, depending on how a school is organized, right? So Brattleboro schools are K6, and Dummerston and Guilford are, Dummerston, we should say K6 for Guilford, even though they are formed as a K8, they're K6. And then Brattleboro Union for secondary. So in total, we have kids in our building. This is not including those private pre-K kids and all of that, and that's why we exclude them for this purpose. It's because we are so inconsistent. Some schools operate pre-K in their buildings, some don't. That would skew this data, and the data is intended to be a reflection of services to kids in the building. So, and that's all part of this long-standing methodology. So this time last year, we had 2,043 kids in the SD for among those schools. And
these are actual kids, not
this is ADM
okay.
in the grade levels that operate at each school. And BUHS includes dams. You see our enrollment is down a little bit. It's essentially, statistically, it's not even a percent change. It's basically flat in the SD. Vernon is actually up, and that's about 4%. So when you have one entity flat and the other one up, it does shift costs because it's a higher proportion. Or another way to say it is the next column over. You see, last year, Vernon was 6.9% of all costs. This year, they're 7.4. And on the flip side, the SD went from 93.1 to 92.6. I add a couple of other statistics, but they're not really used. It just gives you a sense of this is how the Agency of Ed looks at us from an enrollment point of view. And what I'm saying is I added the 242 pre-K and triple E kids that we do have in our census data, and then 36 kids in Vernon that are not at BUHS, on secondary. Just so we have a number, 2,478, it's essentially flat, right, from the prior year. So those statistics are applied to this methodology document, and that's how we get to allocating costs. I'll give you a couple of points of reference, and glad to get into more detail if folks want to, but at this point, I thought I just kind of let you know what is in the SD and what will be in the Vernon Monday evening draft document, and it is in the SD document now. These assumptions. The revenue to the SU is an expense at the SD and in Vernon, right? So these are, you can consider these revenues to the SU and expense to the districts. So the SD needs 2.999, I'm sorry, the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union needs 2.999 million for support of instruction, admin, and Vernon's assessment is 238,000. We'll look at where did that number come from. Special education, the SD assessment, and this is combined, even though there is a difference in the way we calculate elementary special ed versus secondary, because Vernon is not a member of the secondary union. So we can go over that if you like. But there's the assessments, and this is where at the elementary level, it's as if we were one system. On the secondary level, it is proportional based on enrollment, the cost allocation. Essential early ed is, again, it's just regular ed enrollment and the proportion, but the difference there is that the high school is removed because it's obviously not that grade level. So a little different statistic, but it's still the same basis in terms of ADM. And then there's the totals at the bottom here that I've showed you. So that all of those assumptions are in the budget, is either expense at the district level or revenue at the SU. And now we move to how did we get those numbers? So on the, and hopefully to some of you this is familiar because we've been doing this in a similar way with a similar format of documents in an attempt to, even though there's a lot of numbers, it basically is pretty straightforward. It's how many SD kids out of a proportion of the total times the net cost. When I say net cost, if we look at this page 4, I hopefully you remember that 5,000,009 number. Well, we wouldn't want to assess that number because there are some revenues that the SU receives, plus the 1.3 million transportation contract, which is part of the 5 million, is a different assessment basis. And that, again, on this document that you have, that narrative document on page 2, that it's on number of buses. So So what we do is we take the 5 million, we subtract out transportation, and then we subtract out revenue, 330,000 in revenue and another 99,000 in indirect cost grants. So our net assessment is 3.2 million. It's not the 5 million. That's what allows us to break even with that group. If you just wanted to, this is the same kind of thing. So if you wanted to get your bearings and you were looking at this on your own, if you flipped back to page 3, you would see that 3,237,000. And the way it's allocated is it's just 3,237,000 times Vernon's 7.4% equals 238,000. That's how it's calculated. I mentioned here, I'm still on page 4, and I mentioned how the transportation is a little different allocation methodology. Still very simple. It's just how many buses do we contract for? 17 is the answer. Vernon gets 3 buses. The SD gets 14. So it's a cost per bus allocation. So and again, we take away revenue. So it's 1.3 million in cost is the projection. We are projecting 550,000 in revenue, state revenue, and that leaves 792,000 to assess, and then it's a cost per bus. So that's how that's derived. Triple E, again, very straightforward. We take our total costs, and then we remove Brattleboro and BAM's enrollment data because they don't operate at that grade level. So we remove them, and then we do the same thing. 2-year average, multiply the proportion of Vernon kids, which is 12.7 of the total elementary, and 87% for the SD. Those costs and those assessments go into the budgets. So that's the overview. Let's take a little time with the special ed, but I'm imagining, we're throwing a lot of numbers at you, so at some point you're not going to absorb too many more. But because special ed is such a significant part of the SU, it's by far the largest part of the SU, I do want you to at least remember the reference to this, and if you have questions, glad to follow up. Special ed, you've heard a lot about Act 173 and them changing the reimbursement. Well, here it is. They've eliminated the block grant. That I'm now on page 5, and the block grant used to be about $1 million. That's been eliminated. We still do get this revenue. It's called extraordinary aid. It goes by this code 3203. That's a code that we have to use. That's calculated based on a projection of our students who are exceeding $63,000 a year projected for next year. And the state will give us 95% reimbursement after that $63,000 threshold. We anticipate 1.1 million as a reimbursement, and this is just at the secondary level. We do the same calculation at the elementary level. We also have this secondary revenue code 3205, that's for our state place students. And we're projecting 165,000 in reimbursements for that. The Act 173, so in lieu of a percentage reimbursement and the block grant, we're scheduled to receive 2.6 million in this census block grant. And you see that on page 5 there at the top. So that's secondary, and then we look at the elementary. We add the two together. We also look at these other reoccurring federal grants like IDEA, and there's our revenue projection, 8.4 million. We also make calculations for our Dover, Marlboro are non-member town, non-members of the SU that are receiving services at UHS or BAMS, and that's a revenue source for us as well. So once we identify all of our revenues, we then compare that to our cost, and the balance is what has to be assessed to our districts, and that's what you see there at the bottom of page 5. It's the elementary and secondary assessment for the districts, and those have been totaled where we started back there on page 3. I gave you the total of those, but this is all the derivation of these numbers. So if you wanted to try to follow it, I can help you understand that.
I have a question that may be too specific for this. I'm just wondering if for special education, if there is speech therapy offered here?
There is.
Okay, and do you know how much that costs per student, or does it really depend on that student's needs for the amount of speech therapy they need?
Exactly. That's individualized per student.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll just go quickly in the next couple of documents, and I think I've covered what I would hope to cover. Page 6 is the allocation that allows us to get to separating special ed secondary at Vernon and Dover, Marlboro, the non-member towns, so that we can identify both the revenue that should go with the Vernon students, and then recognize that the state doesn't send us the revenue for Dover, Marlboro, Halifax, and so on. So we have to make sure that we're not making a profit, but we don't want to have a loss either. So that's what page 6 does for us. It just identifies the proportional enrollments at grade level so that we can assign costs after taking out revenue, so that we don't run a deficit. The next page, page 7, is an onerous page. I'm happy to walk through it. I don't think you're going to want to do that right now, but it basically is taking everything we've talked about and identifying the secondary costs, 6.6 million, and then removing revenue, removing the Marlboro, Halifax, Dover kids, and then identifying how much of the 6 million after all of the revenues have been taken away should be assessed to Vernon and then the SD. And the results there, you see 483,000. If you are looking at that, it's on line 14.1 is the Vernon share of secondary, and 2.4 million is the SD, and that's on line 19 of that sheet. Let's see, I think, yeah, so then when we're in the detailed document, now you see I just scrolled to the next page 8. It's the beginning of what you've reviewed before, but now it does have the revenue assumptions in it. And like I just said, the number 238,000, I don't know if you put that into short-term memory, but there it is. That's the way the system works. We make the calculations based on spending. We go in and we look at all of our other revenue sources, and then we balance the budget with the assessments.
Okay. Questions from the board? Liz, any questions? And again, we have another week, so feel free to read this over, sleep on it, read it over, repeat, and send me questions.
I have one question, and acknowledging that this is so far above. So with that being said, looking at the expenditures, maybe this is just the special ed.
Well, that's that.
I guess so we see increases pretty universal.
Yeah.
And I recall a few years ago, at least part of the increases was due to a change in like health insurance for employees. And so what I'm wondering is if we had people in the public who were looking at these numbers and wondering why, is there, would you say that I don't know if I want to use the word significant, but a sizable amount of that might be because of pandemic funding being, no longer being available. So if someone was to come to us, that would be an explanation that you would say would be accurate?
Well, I would say that the pandemic definitely caused a lot of demand for services and a need for spending, which is primarily in student support services. So additional psychologists, additional social workers, that's also in this budget. And speech language services. So that's there's two main cost drivers. The single largest is an increase in outside placements. So the need beyond our current capacity to meet a certain group of kids' needs. We've gone from about 2.8 million to 4.2 million in this budget of tuition cost. So that's us dispersing funds to other entities to meet our students' needs. So that's the single largest. I mean, that's over $1 million increase in that.
And if I'm not mistaken, I'm sorry if I get these two board meetings mushed, but one of them I seem to recall that you indicated that some of that at least was the result of pandemic sort of.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Residual.
Yeah, and Tate spoke to that a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh, okay, so that might, I didn't get something of that.
You did hear that. And then I would say the second is, it is the new employment that's been required, but also this wage inflation environment that everybody is dealing with, and that is on average about a 5% wage increase and a 12.7% health insurance increase. So those numbers are in here as well.
What was the 12.7?
In health insurance.
What was the other one?
About 5% average increase on the collective bargaining agreement for our unions. So those are three cost drivers. The single largest individual is the tuition increase.
And that's in this budget. I think we're gonna find a different story when you go to your SD and I go to Vernon.
Yes.
We're gonna be looking more at the wage inflation and the health insurance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Fortunately, this remains a relatively small percentage of the SD and the Vernon budget. When you put these numbers in there, they are significant increases, but they're a relatively small proportion of your total budget. So it in itself does not change the district budgets significantly.
Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to mention, we did have a chance, Mark and I compared notes on answering your questions. I think there were maybe 5 or 6 questions. And
I sent them around to people. If anyone didn't get them, let me know, or if you want to ask additional. And again, we just keep reading them, keep sending.
Can I ask a follow-up to those questions?
You can.
I haven't got the answers here, but the HR assistant position, you said that you notified DEI, Michaela.
Yep.
What did she have to say about it?
She supports the addition. It will free up more time to collaborate with Stacy as the HR coordinator. So yeah, absolutely.
So she's right behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stacy was pretty excited about the potential she's mentioned a platform that could be expanded with our college affiliates, I guess 30 colleges, but it's hard to create the contact with the limited amount of time that we have. There's a diverse workforce initiative here in Brattleboro. She's working with that group. Would love to expand that as well. And Whitney's going to make some remarks over at Keene State. Did I hear that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. For again, recruiting efforts, but it's definitely a collaborative effort. And right now, our HR department is really strictly working on transactional issues that have to be attended to in terms of getting people signed up for benefits, addressing claims. New hire orientation is critical.
It's really hard for her to leave her desk, basically. So we're hoping to create some flexibility, take some of these tasks off of her plate, so that she can get out there and go to job fairs.
Do we have a solid goal for increasing diverse workforce? Because we keep mentioning we want to diversify the workforce. Do we have a goal?
Yes, we do have a goal. I mean, the board has stated that goal.
I mean, a specific numerical goal of we'll increase it by 5% in 2 years or something like that.
We don't have a number. No.
Otherwise, we really don't know if we've succeeded.
That to me is one of those summer retreat conversations about, okay, we want this, what can we do to go about it? And the other question, which is quite different, it's again getting to addressing the learning gap by hiring more tutors. Again, don't we need more specific data on that? Which schools need how many more tutors? Because what I've heard is, well, we'll just hire a few more tutors. I think it's so important because we know the positive impact that tutors can have in addressing that learning gap. So shouldn't we have a much more focused, detailed, data-driven target for tutors in the budget?
We do have that data, Tim. We talked about it last night in terms of the winter benchmark coming up. We use data every day to identify interventions or enrichment opportunities for students. In terms of tutors, what we've done and will continue to do is rehire or hire our teachers to extend their day to provide additional supports for students. And we've been doing that for a number of years. And obviously the pandemic really threw a wrench in that work, but we're really trying to reset and reestablish those systems.
Now, do we see those in this budget or are those in our individual budgets, tutors?
Well, most of it is in the individual budgets.
It's in the individuals,
but there's a fair amount of support in Title I, but that's mostly academic support teachers.
Okay.
Is that one-to-one tutoring?
Can be one-to-one, can be small group.
Yeah.
So to address this major academic problem, how much has that increased? Do we have how much increases there in the budget for those
after-school programs?
After school.
I don't know. They've always been very healthy budgets.
Yeah, they're significant, and I understand the Putney Central program that was kind of a new initiative this year is going to be extended into this fiscal year, 24. And Paul's mentioned the possibility of another fairly significant federal grant that could help us replicate both that summer program and sustain after-school programs. So, but
before the pandemic hit, my school specifically 90% of our kids were staying at the school until 4:15, receiving an additional healthy snack and receiving either enrichment or intervention opportunities. So I think all of our schools are working towards that. It's just, recreating that culture.
Are you having trouble finding, like, I assume with teachers and anyone who's looking to hire, are you having difficulty finding people to fill those tutor roles?
Like I said, we're really focusing on the folks who are in our buildings already and providing that benefit for extending their day.
Are you having difficulty with finding teachers who would be willing to do that additional? Or are there, is that a pretty well, pretty well, I guess.
I would say it's a work in progress. We're still coming out of a pandemic. We have teachers who used to stay until 4:15 every day to do that, who, are making that commitment to not do that. And then we have many teachers who are continuing to do that. So,
And I think there's also just the lens of like our MLSS system is set up so that our AST teachers and our special educators, which like you see some of the increases here, like you can think of their work almost as tutoring during the whole school day, because really like their instruction is very individualized to student need, and tutoring programs are great and we should absolutely continue and expand those as we can. But I think the bigger way that we're addressing that massive learning gap that we're all seeing is the delivery of specialized instruction and providing professional development to our full-time teachers who are working with the vast majority of those students that are needing those additional layers of support all day long.
And then tutors from the building, knowing the kids, are going to provide a better quality tutorial.
True. On the other hand, we know how difficult teaching is, and you're tired at the end of the day. There's you might have seen in the Reformer that very nice article about the academies, that after-school program. That's great, but again, we have to focus where the need is most in math and reading deficiencies. And you've spoken well about how enrichment programs engage students so they do better across the board.
Right.
But still, we need to get data on how big the problem is and if our strategies are being effective. We have to have that.
Yeah, and we do.
Yeah.
I would also just say like teachers are tired at the end of the day. Kids are also pretty tired at the end of the day. So like if you're thinking about how to maximize their best time for learning, it's usually during the day. And then if we can, entice them with these fun ways to stay after school and engage and work on their language skills and all of these other foundational pieces that we don't always think of as academic, but really are pretty heavily academic. Social emotional learning, that's a huge need, right? That's actually what's driving our outplacement costs. So, if we can work on those in our after school programs, that I just don't want you to think like that's a sunk cost. Like that's really valuable work as well.
Sure. Yeah, it's really focused on student engagement and student building that love of the school community and relationship building, which is just foundational work, for our community.
Yeah.
Deborah has her hand up. Deborah?
Yeah. The issue of after-school academic support came up at the last Student Advisory Committee meeting a week ago. And so I'm curious, as you're talking about after-school programs with tutoring in mind, are buses available at that point to transport students home at the conclusion of the tutoring session?
At the elementary schools, there are late-run buses to support those programs.
Okay.
I'd have to follow up on the high school, Deborah.
So what I was told is that there are no late buses at the high school. It's just at the end of the academic day, those buses get packed and they leave. So that would be an issue. for the older kids. They wouldn't really be able to participate if that's the case. So I leave it to you, Mark, to follow up on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
There is $200,000 in this current budget for after-school programs. You just looked it up in the SD.
In the SD?
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? All right. So again, this is on the website. Everybody do your homework. Send additional questions. We'll see what we can answer during the week as soon as possible. I would expect next week might be a long meeting just because we have to hash it out and we've got to get this done.
Yeah.
All right. If there are no other questions and no new business, I would say I would entertain a motion. So we have 2 executive sessions, both under 1 VSA 313A3. We can do them consecutively. Why don't we do, if someone would like to make a motion to enter into executive session under 1 VSA 313A3 for the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer, and invite in Mark and Frank. And then our second one will be to invite in Mark and Elaine.
Oh, Elaine is here. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second? So Kelly made the motion
Second.
and Tim has seconded it. There will be no all those in favor of entering executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. There will be no action when we come out. So everyone is welcome to leave, or I can put you, Elaine, I will put you into the waiting room and we will try to do our first executive session within 15 minutes. All right, thank you everybody. So we will enter executive session at 7:12.